Wahene speak. That is what is recorded in the history. The whole year the Kawaka just make one bearded male white man. The whole year. I mean, Speak didn't have a shower. He was coming all the way from the coast. The only thing we knew yesterday, the whole Kabaka of Uganda, was that he met this one lonely, lost wife. How is that possible? How is it possible? Then they teach us in primary school. Stanley passed Karagwe, he met Manika, he went to Mbarara, he's a slave. He was but because my life was the Bible and the survival of our people depended on it, I had to biology, I had to go into genetics, I had to go into mathematics to try and understand it, not only understand it, understand it, so that they can explain it to someone. When I understand it, going under the table, I want to stand and talk. So, when I'm ready to go, I don't want to leave no stone unturned and turn every stone twice.
Your ancestors in the world that you created were able, with very little knowledge, they didn't know the European, they didn't study the Middle Nature. Chetwaya did not know about Ra. Yeah, Sandwa did not go to school, try philosophy, try military strategy, try whatever. Yet in most of the time, they outfought, outfronted some of the best military genius that Europe had ever possessed. Do that at the time. If they were able to do that at the time, what about you? Who's got a phone? Who's got a fax? You don't only have a phone, you have a fax and a mobile phone.
Every 5 seconds, a child is dying of malaria in Africa. Now, to get the dose of life-saving anti-malaria is about $5. But there is no government to give anti-malaria. When somebody gets malaria, if they have no money, they get ill and die. So the question that I was asking, and many people were asking, was, if you really want to help children, why begin with a disease that they don't have? Why not go why not look for something that is killing them?
This is Oxford, Cambridge, where you go to get this degree, where you get the first degree, which is a BA, bachelor's degree. You know, they don't believe in marriage. So they don't, the only thing they can give you is a bachelor's degree. So, because you can stumble on a conference like this and get shocked when a few ideas are thrown in your head. I don't believe what Nana Sekmet said. I don't believe that kind of stuff. It's okay. They teach you how to critique, not to believe anything. When they say, they say, what do you think about black people building their own institutions? You say, well, it has its own advantages and disadvantages.
The high culture of Egyptian civilization that starts around the Nile Valley eventually ends up here in the Giza Plateau, in the pyramids of Giza, one of the highest high technical civilizations that African people put together, starting all the way from Uganda, covering present-day Sudan, and going up here in Egypt.
established that more than 7 million years ago, a black woman stretched forth her hands under God and gave us the first human being. In the beginning was a black woman. This black woman lived at the foothills of the mountains of the moon. This black woman lived in the Iracrustan region known in ancient time as the land of the gods. This black woman lived at the source of the Nile. This black woman lived between the two domes of the Great Rift Valley. This black woman's genes run through the genes of every human being. This black woman's DNA is the string that connects every person that walks on earth. That is why we say that let him that is worthy be worthy still, and let him that is righteous be righteous still. So behold, I come quickly. My reward is with me to give unto every man and woman for and according to his reward should be. For in the beginning was a black woman. This woman gave rise to a human. Never was a time when a black woman was not. Never will be time when black people will cease to be. Because we are eternal, my brothers and sisters.
It was interesting last time when I left, there was one of the senior officers, I believe he's a trainer here, from India. And he met me outside in the corridor and he said, sir, my son worked on the Wales project. Remember I told you that IBM and National Geographic, they had a project looking at the Y chromosome, trying to prove who is the father of us all that they call scientific Adam. Now, Colonel said his son worked on the Wales project that I was describing, and I think he said in front of the commander that it was exactly like I described. So it is most of the information that we push or we put in front of you is not made up. It exists, and a lot of people know. But you know as well as I do, obviously, that knowledge is power. Money is not power. Land is the basis of independence, freedom, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. But it is not power. It is knowledge that is power. And I said last time I was here that the wars that are being fought now are really psychological warfare. If they can psyche up you to believe that you are inferior or that you will be defeated, even traditionally in African societies, you know, when you quarrel with somebody, when you are raising cows and you quarrel with the person, this is just psyching the person up to see the man has removed his watch now, you are really ready to fight. It's the same, you know, it has happened throughout history, you know, that in war, you use psychology, you know, because if you remember when America invaded Afghanistan, they first bombed Afghanistan for almost 3 months. Now, if you are really that mighty and you have SWAT teams and Navy SEALs and Delta Force and Marine, why don't you go in? Why do you throw a stone from far and wait to say we are doing assessment to see how much damage we have done? Because you are scared. You know, you're scared that you will go and get there and something will happen. Actually, I had intended also to bring a documentary of the fighting that was raging in Iraq, the so-called Sunni guerrillas with American forces on a day-to-day account filmed by Russia undercover. which I will be able to bring so you can see that the people we think, or the majority of the world thinks are really brave, are not brave at all.
At 2 o'clock in the morning of the 22nd of August last year, US Special Forces, with a Fox TV news crew in tow, entered the village. The Americans, accompanied by Afghan troops and guards hired from a nearby village, were searching for a small group of Taliban they'd been told were meeting there. After a brief firefight, the Special Forces called in an AC-130 gunship and began to pound the village. The AC-130 stayed over the village for several hours, firing artillery shells with deadly accuracy, spraying shrapnel in all directions. The attack lasted until dawn. First light revealed a scene of devastation.
بمبار وکړي دغه ځای دغه ته هغه ځای پورې د خاورو کوټې سهار تاري چې بمبار وکړي یو سره لمبه وه کله دغه چې یلی کې دغه سیرالې وه دغه مځکې ته زه پر دغه ځای ولاړ وم وختم هغه دغه ته برته شوه سوم لاړم د څاوو زینو ته شوه سوم چې سره لمبه دغه سیراله دا کله دا زما ګوتې داسې سرې لمبې رالې دغه
مامور چیغې کړه چې چیغې کړه موږ انګړ ته د باندې دا کور د کانګړ ته بیده وه په خواږه خوب بیده وو ننوتو په کور چې ننوتو چې کتل مو چې دغه سرای ښځې کوچنیان راځغلي دا زما د پلار سرای ته راله چې راله دوباره دغه چې موږ هم په دا کور نه چې تیاره راځي وبمان غورځي تیاره راځي وبمان
کسی نمیتونست رسیده هیچ کس هر طفلی که از اون خانه برآمد به دیگه خانه داخل شد همون خانه را زد شهید کرد هر سفیری که از خانه برآمد به دیگه خانه رفت اون خانه را زد شهید کرد.
What exactly happened when the American troops first entered the village is a matter of controversy. The Americans say they immediately came under small arms fire and withdrew to the edge of the village. The villagers claim the Americans opened fire as soon as they entered the village.
15 تا از مو 6 آل 100 تا بمونده حالا میگه رفیقامو یک میده گل بود یکی رزو بود یکی روما بود یکی آکیله بود اسماش بگی هست یکی شالینه بود خیلی هستم بود یکی شکیلا بود یکی دیگه یکم سایرو اینا هم موقع کشته شد با ما یک کودک نما که ما خیلی برم بازی کنه به مکتب بره.
Then on the 2nd of September, 12 days after the attack, the Americans published the results of their inquiry. They said they had killed over 30 Taliban fighters and arrested 5 Taliban. They did accept 5 to 7 civilians had died, saying investigators determined the casualty numbers by on-site observations immediately following the engagement. It is clear from this admission that US forces had evidence of civilian deaths at a time when they denied that there had been any civilian casualties. Witnesses on the ground contradicted the new US position on the number of casualties, including a local doctor who arrived on the scene early in the morning. He has withheld his identity for fear of retribution from the locals. He has already lost his job for speaking out and still receives threatening phone calls.
دیگه صبح که به ساحه رفتیم و یک دفعه که رفتیم هم مردم زیر دیوار و کلوخ و خانه و اینا افتاده بودم. باز بعد از که اجساد از اینا بیرون کردن تقریبا شاید 90 الی 100 نفر اجساد از اینا همه بیرون بود یک مسجدی بود داخل از اون مسجد بود اونم اونجا انداخته بودن تا وقتی که مردم رسیدم همگی آمادم اینا رو دفن کردم و کسایی که زخمی بود زخمی خور به شفاخانه و کلینیکا بردن اون تا زخمی خیلی اندک بود تلفات زیاد دیگه خیلی پارچه بودم سوخته بودم خیلی خراب شده بودم به قابل شناخت بعضی نبود.
The Americans maintained their position on casualties, that is until this mobile phone footage surfaced on the 8th of September. Taken by one of the villagers, it clearly shows dozens of bodies laid out on the floor of the mosque, overflowing onto the gravel outside. Close inspection reveals many of them are women, children and old men.
So today I've been given a subject of African society in the contemporary world order? Can our African societies, can our African values survive? I suppose that is the question that I have to deal with today. And I believe each one should have a copy of Sheikh Anta Diop's Civilization of Barbarism, and it looks at African clan and Indo-European clan. Now you have to understand this, that as humanity develops around the Nile, yeah, when we talk about societies, we talk about the development of humanity in the northern cradle and the development of humanity in the southern cradle. Africa is what is called in history the southern cradle. And if you should remember nothing about what I've said to you so far, I want you to remember this, that humanity develops in Africa and in Europe. Europe didn't exist at the time. The word Europe is a sociological construct. It has no meaning in geography. Europe is not a continent because a continent is massive landmass surrounded by water. Europe is neither massive nor surrounded by water. It is actually the size of Congo or Sudan. We call it in Asia, in history or paleontology, Eurasia. So humanity that develops in Europe around the Eurasian steppes, present-day Russia and the Caucasus Mountains, and then that develops in Africa. Africa is called the Southern Cradle. The Southern Cradle had land plentiful, resource plentiful, and people wealthy. So they had enough food, because however you look at wealth, wealth is always determined in how much food you have. It was true in ancient time, it is still true today. So when you think of defending a country, if you are not thinking in terms of food, you're finished. Because your soldiers, they will go for 3-4 days. If they learned about fasting, if they can manage a week. But on the second week, believe you me, the orders will not be listened to very well if they have no food. So in Africa you had people plentiful, land plentiful, and resource plentiful. So you didn't have to kill your neighbor for food or for breakfast. You sat around the Nile and watched the sun rise, and very soon you begin to relate the movement of the sun and the movement of the stars with the rise and fall of the Nile. In Europe, you had people poor, land poor, resource poor. It was true then, it is true now. What is the national resource of England? A bit of oil in the North Sea, which is depleted, some coal, which is not exploitable anymore, and potatoes. That is the national resources of England. They call them, of course, Irish potatoes. I said last time I was here that they are not Irish because they came from Mexico. They are Mexican potatoes. It is not true to call them Irish. But the Irish only lived on oats. So, then as of now, they had no resources. And every time you live around a neighbor who has no resources, he will always covet what does not belong to him. And every time Europe has a problem, it always looks outside its own boundaries to solve it, because they never have solutions within their own boundaries. Right now, the economies of Europe have literally collapsed. Totally. You cannot name a single European economy that is standing. America's only exports is armament. They have nothing else they are making or they're exporting. It is arms. Now, you know, of course, if you sell arms, if there are no wars, what are you going to do? You know, you're going to wake up in the morning and say, what's in the news? They say, no, they have signed a peace agreement in Somalia. Actually, the Ugandan soldiers seem to have stabilized that country. So what about Sudan? He said, oh, wait, there was another accord in Ethiopia, and they are not going to fight anymore. And Congo, they say M13 or M23 rebels, the Munyonyo Accord has kind of solved that. What do you think is going through your mind when you sell weapons? You know, you're in trouble, you are out of luck, because there are no wars. So the only thing that most of these countries have, Britain particularly and America, is really armament for export. They don't produce anything anymore. Because they exploited their own people by not wanting to pay them right wages, they outsource most of these jobs in China, in Thailand, in Vietnam. So they don't have an industry to produce goods and services to sell elsewhere other than military services. So In the northern cradle, you had what we call patriarchal systems. In the southern cradle, you had matriarchal systems. Patriarchal system, I'm going to go through this quickly. Patriarchal systems are mainly where everything depends on the physical strength of the male. And it depended on the physical strength of the male because most of Europe, because of the weather, because of the land, it required the physical strength of the male. For example, the ice that covered Europe 40,000 years ago was a mile thick. So, if you were not tall, how Europeans are obsessed with tallness, it is because of the ice. If you are not tall, you just disappear. So they assumed that if you were a woman, you couldn't cope. European institutions or Indo-European institutions did not verify or did not recognize women. Even the codes of Napoleon did not introduce laws that verified women. Greek gods who sat on Mount Olympus were worshipped by mainly or required every man to sleep with a man. Homosexuality comes from the Greeks and the Greek gods, and it was celebrated by men sleeping with men, caning their wives 46 times, and of course drinking each other's blood. Now the women who felt rejected went to an island called Lesbos and developed lesbianism. So in the Indo-European culture, a man, no god would be a woman. A god would exist without a goddess. That is why in Africa you could not find a god without a goddess or without children. But in the Indo-European culture, no. A god does not have children. He exists as a male. In Indo-European culture, it becomes difficult for a woman to rise at the time we are talking about, to head an institution or to rule. So here in the southern cradle, you had matriarchal systems. In the northern cradle, you had patriarchal systems. In both, they had what they call clan exogamy, which means you didn't marry inside your clan. You had to marry outside it. And this was because they knew the laws of biology. For example, those of you who keep cows, you know that a bull should not mount its daughter because the cow that comes out will not be strong. That is the same. That is why the Baganda would give a particular name to a particular clan. So if somebody says, I'm Nabanja, you know that he is from Mbogo clan, and I cannot marry that person because he's my sister. Now, in the southern cradle, the lineage, the resources that the people had enabled them to develop a pacifist morality. Whereas in the northern cradle, lack of resources enabled them to develop what we call a warrior mentality. If you remember all the books that you read in school about European philosophy or about European literature, they were all about war. King Solomon's Mines, it's about war. It's either about theft, about war, about murder. Murder in the cathedral, Tale of Two Cities, Richard III, Treasure Island. Treasure Island is funny because it has even a man with one leg running to an island to get the treasure that he didn't leave there, And there's a 15 man on the dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and the bottle of rum. Drink and the devil has done for the rest. If you look at European literature, European psychology, it is all about warrior mentality. Most of their stories, even the films that you see today, are about what? Are about war. They are about war and bloodshed. In Greek drama, when on the stage, when the man has a knife or a sword and he's about to kill somebody, that's called that melodrama. It is a thriller. When they say thriller, it means there's blood. That's what thriller is. There is blood. Somebody's getting killed. In the southern cradle, no, sir. It is pacifist. It is about how you go about life. You don't have necessarily to be strong. And if you look at African societies and how African societies resolve conflict, you will see that the bully, that the man who fights, that the man who beats is not somebody whom everybody looks up to. No, sir, it is not. So, within the context of the northern cradle and the southern cradle, The Southern Corridor having a pacifist morality. In the Southern Corridor too, there was welcoming of strangers. In the Northern Corridor was fear of strangers. Xenophobia. Once they see you like this, and you are not from them, then it is danger. Then you are not welcome. I remember time I was coming from one part of Manchester to Birmingham. I had a gentleman called Simon Mayende. He's now, I think, he's in the political office, in the Prime Minister's office. So a vehicle we were driving broke down. And then in England, you call somebody to come and help. And they first have to ask you, what car is it, what engine, all this. Then they take time to come. So there were these roughnecks, about 6 of them. And they came, they saw us, 2 black people standing near the car, and they walked toward the car. They come from, there is an organization in England, I believe it is called, I remember its name. But within that organization, National Front, it's called the National Front. And within the National Front, they have an organization called Combat 18. And their job is to kill black people. Remember that in the world, there are over 720 white organizations. Their job is simply to kill black people. So, these members came, and they stood near us, and started calling us names. So I said to Mayende, give me permission, to kill this man. And Mayende looked at me, so eventually he understood. He pretended also, and I said, I beg you, give me permission to kill this man. And when he hesitated, I jumped up, I kicked Mayende, and Mayende fell in the gutter. And we exaggerated the fall. Now, these 6 people, when they saw what I had done to my colleague, they took off. They ran away. But I'm using that example to demonstrate 2 things. I had no skill to fight off 6 people. But I showed them that if I am prepared even to kill the man whom I have come with, then what do you think I'm going to do to you? So I worked on their psyche to frighten them away. That is number 1. Number 2 is to show them that in Europe, Indo-European culture, they do not like strangers. They don't. Everything they develop is for them, it is we and us. Whereas in Africa, we develop a welcome of strangers. In ancient time, you traveled anywhere in Africa unmolested. No theft, no jail, nobody ever went to one. In your own house, even today, you keep the best plate for a guest that has not made an invitation. You have the best chicken for somebody who hasn't even come. You have the best bed sheets, a spare bed for a visitor. What visitor? If somebody asks you, what visitor? When is he coming? No, you don't know. But you know a visitor will surely come. And when he comes, you will give him water to wash his feet. He will wash his hands. You will feed him even before you ask him his name. After he has eaten, then you will say, where do we trace you to? You don't even say, what is your name? No, sir. You say, where do we trace you to? If you don't remember, then he begins to say, do you know your cousin who was married in Tanzania? And then he had a relative, and then he gave birth. This is in Africa. We always welcome strangers, and most of the time, wrong types of stranger. That is one of the things that has, when you ask about African societies, when you ask about African achievement, and the question comes up and says, if we were so strong in ancient time, why are we at the bottom? And the answer we historians give is clear. Because we are always welcoming strangers. And in most cases, we treat the stranger better than our own. In your own home, the bed that you have for the visitor, even your own child doesn't sleep on that bed. Even the head of the family doesn't eat from that good plate. It is in Africa. It is our tradition to welcome strangers. I am sure that the brothers who are from Sudan in here, when the food is less or some, you give them priority to say, let him go. Because you feel responsibility. Why? Because you nurtured life here. urgent need to mother them. But you know what, mother? There is always a child in the family. There is always a child in the family. There is no family that doesn't have a wrong child. No. Unless you are prepared as honorable men of Kimaka to recognize that the ice where European people incubated in the caves and hillsides of Europe with no food, with no resources, gave them a psyche that is totally different from yours. Every time you fight a war with the European, you will not be successful. Because most of the time, the wars that African people fight with non-Africans, African people take long to catch up. Because you have even in sayings, like in Ankole, they have a saying where they say that those who wrestle each other, showing each other potholes, that it's not difficult to separate them. I have brought another document, which I think they are photocopying, about the war, European wars, timeline of European wars. I want to photocopy the whole book, but I have just brought one that talks about 100-year war. France and England fought a war that lasted more than 100 years. And all the other nations were included from 1337 to about 1445. It is known in history as 100-year war. When European people talk about us, they talk about civil war. Oh, Africa is full of civil war. There is a war in Uganda. There is a war in Sudan. There is a war in Nigeria. There is a war in Mozambique. And we turn around and look down and we think, oh my God, what's wrong with us? Europeans have been at war right from conception. There has never been a time when Europe was not at war. They had a war that lasted 100 years. One time I was giving a lecture at the Peace Institute in Eindhoven, in Holland. And they asked me about Koen, Joseph Koen. And they said, why has the war taken 20 years? And I said, well, why did the 100-year war last more than 100 years? They were so ashamed that they couldn't even say 120-year war. They call it a 100-year war. If you think of wars between Prussia and Austria and the Visigoths and the Vikings and Vandals and Huns and Gauls and Visigoths, every name, the Vikings, the Visigoths, the Vandals, even give us the word vandalism. Vandalism. They would invade a village, they would cut off their tongue, they would leave no eye open to weep for the dead. They would kill everything that they would see. Why? So, in terms of European, in terms of war and bloodshed, that is the IMAC of Indo-Europeans. Now, in the Southern Cradle, there is a commitment to not only the ancestors, but to the Creator. Once you miss that link, most of the time people ask me whether I believe in God. But in Africa, even if you don't believe in God, God will believe in you. African people believe in God. They eat, they worship, they act. Why? Because we are the people that evoked the concept of God. Evoked the concept of God, of one true God, of the supreme God. And we believe in life after death. We believe in eternity. In my language, in Nyankole, when a person dies, they don't say he's gone. As in many African languages, they say he has. They don't say he's dead, they say he has gone. They don't say the late so-and-so, no. They say the one who has gone, so-and-so, Omjenzi. He has gone. He has gone somewhere. Because we believe in the concept of eternity. But that concept can also be turned around and used against us. Because, as Marcus Garvey said, in the side of battle, God is always on the side of the strongest battalions. European people, Indo-European people, believe only in a God that recognizes only them Then, look at the Hebrews and the concept of a chosen people. Chosen people. Most of the time we ask the question, chosen by who? And to do what? Who particularly chose you? And I ask this question at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Who chose you to do what? Because if it is the choosing, we were the first people to populate the earth, and we lived on earth for 5.5 million years. I want to read for you the God in India. The first people to populate India were black people. They were known as Dravidians. They are still there up to today. They are sometimes called Harijan. Indira Gandhi called them Harijan. And they are called Sudra. The Sudra. Now, the Indo-Europeans that we are describing from the northern corridor invade India from the north about 1600 BC. They fight a long war with black people that populate India, which lasted more than 700 years. It is captured in an Indian epic known as the Mahabharata. It ends with the defeat of black people. According and the codification of God, who is called Brahma, where the oppression of black people is encoded even in the religion of the god Brahma, known as Hinduism. Now, they imagine that the god Brahma, his head is white. Underneath the god's head, the chest is next to white, like brown. And the feet of the god Brahma, where he wipes his feet, is that of the Sudra or the blacks. According to the laws of Hindu God, you can verify this, which are codified in an ancient text known as the Rigved Veda or the Vedas. If a black person, you, a Sudra, hears the word of God, Brahma, you should have molten lead poured into your ears. If you articulate the words of God, Brahma, your tongue should be chopped off. If you conceptualize the words of God, Brahma, your head should be chopped off. And the law says that food gets contaminated by the look of a pig, the smell of a dog, and just the look of a Sudra or the look of a black person. Up to today, the black people that live in India, the Sudra, cannot get employment. The only jobs that are reserved for them is working in sewage, toilets, and they are not even allowed to wear gloves. They have to use their own hands to move human waste. And there are 200 million black people in India. By law, you can't open a business. You can't marry. Even killing you is not illegal. Even the great Mahatma Gandhi, peace be upon him, did not solve the problem of the black people whom he called the Harijan or the downtrodden. He could not. This is not yesterday. This is today. This is today when our economy on the main is run by people from India, of whom we know nothing about. If you find me as an African worshipping a God you don't recognize as Jesus, you will call it idol worship, and you will even bring police to knock down my shrine. That is true. And you report in the newspaper that the shrine had been destroyed, and you bring a pastor and sing. But go in every Indian shop, every Indian hospital. What do you see? Idols. There is Novak Hospital. As you enter, a cow, a rabbit wearing some nice clothes, a banker playing the flute, candles burning there. So, what is it, therefore, that makes you go after me with my idols and shrine in Butaleja or God knows where, and the Novak Hospital you leave exposed every day? He was telling me the Meta, was it? Got Meta, not far from here. When you drive past Lugazi, huge shrine of Indian gods. There'd be a cow wearing some clothes. There'd be a rabbit. There'd be people playing flutes. There'd be a god with several hands and coming out of his back. But that's okay. You fly past it like you have not seen it. But if you came to my home, you'll begin saying, what is that? Why? You would start engaging me in a philosophical discussion about the God. Not that I have it, no. But why? It is because we have accepted the European definition of us as inferior. We've accepted that. Anybody can come and teach a black person something. We don't ask. They don't even have to have studied us. If they ask you now to appoint you to go to India as a military attaché or as a lecturer at an Indian college, my God, you will spend sleepless nights reading thousands of books about India. You will know about the Harappa civilization that you get. You will not take it for granted. You will read. You can't go to America and not know about the American War of Independence and General Washington. No! But you will meet an advisor to the governor of Bank of Uganda who has not read a single book about Africa. To defend yourself, the logic of the oppressed cannot be the same as the logic of the oppressor, my brother commandant. No way! The cat cannot have the same philosophy as a rat. Because the catness of the cat is in catching a rat. That is how you know it is a true cat. The moment a rat accepts to go to a senior defense college of cats and pose with photographs outside, looking at how many cats trained me as a rat to go and defend my rat population, then you are in trouble. And a serious one. Because whenever the cat comes, you will even find your door open. You will say, he is my trainer. He trained me. And he says, I have a defense maneuver that involves catching you.